All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited you could join us today for what promises to be a very informative discussion with Senate Appropriations Committee Chair Senator Sarah Anthony. For those of you who don't know me, real quick, my name is Kristen Noner. I'm a lobbyist here at Kelly Cawthorne. And I actually had the opportunity to see Senator Anthony this morning as she received the Legislator of the Year award from one of our clients, the Area Agencies on Aging Association. I'm sure that adds to a long list of accomplishments and accolades for you, Senator. So before we get into the discussion today, I want to introduce the Senator, share a bit more with you about her background. Throughout her 20-year career in public service, Senator Anthony has made history multiple times, serving as Mid-Michigan's first African-American woman to be elected to the Michigan House of Representatives and the Michigan Senate. In 2023, she became the first Black woman to chair the powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, where she leads budget negotiations on behalf of the state Senate. Some of her legislative priorities include strengthening education, expanding access to health care, reforming Michigan's criminal justice system, supporting workers, and uplifting small businesses. Before serving in the House of Representatives, Senator Anthony served for almost a decade as the Deputy and Interim Executive Director with the Michigan College Access Network. Senator Anthony was born and raised in Lansing and holds degrees from Central Michigan University and Western Michigan University. Senator, thank you for being here. I know you've joined us before on the webinar series. I'm going to yield the floor to you to make some remarks, and then we'll get into some questions.
Thank you. It's been good to see you so many times today. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. I see familiar names, maybe not faces because y'all aren't on camera, but I see folks that I know from different parts of our journey, different things that we've been able to work on together. So just thank you for allowing me to be here. This budget cycle was rough. This was a rough one. This is now my third year having a seat at the budget table, helping to negotiate and craft an $80+ billion budget. And there's a lot that we expected would be different, unorthodox, particularly in divided government. The first 2 years that I've served in this role, we've been in a trifecta. So we anticipated that it would look different, that we would need to make compromises, stretch our ability to work across the aisle. But this was different. The chaos that has ensued at the federal level has absolutely permeated here at the state level. And I know we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like financially, but just politically, the discourse, the vibes have been off. And unfortunately, it has made for a not only an unorthodox process, but a process that has created a lot of chaos amongst our stakeholder groups and unfortunately our people. So there's been lots that we are proud of that we can point to as areas of compromise and success. And many of our values here in the Senate were absolutely embedded into this year's budget. But make no mistake, this was different and not really in a good way. So happy to start thinking through ways that we can refine this process for the FY27 budget, which we're already thinking about now. And hopefully we can continue to partner with many of you all to craft a budget that reflects the needs of our people. Oh, you're muted, Kristen.
Sorry. Thank you, Senator, for that introduction. You touched on some of the themes that we want to cover today. I just want to give the audience a reminder that if you have questions, you can submit them through the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to them today. So Senator, you kind of talked about this budget process, chaos, unorthodox, and you've been involved in many budgets during your years in Lansing. How would you kind of rank this budget in terms of ability to negotiate and kind of find common ground?
Yeah, not to be like a pessimist at all or like glass half empty, but this was trash. This was not a way to govern. This was not a way to build a budget using taxpayer dollars. in my remarks, when I talk about the budget and process, I try to minimize my partisanship because my role in many ways isn't partisan. It's one that is just minding the state's coffers. But under the leadership of Speaker Hall, this year the House just did not come to the table early enough to negotiate in earnest. It was just chaotic for no reason. Manufactured chaos is what I like to say. For instance, the Senate and the governor presented our budgets as they normally are presented, which is in the spring, ready to go. Unfortunately, the House presented their budget at the 11th hour. We saw the House demonstrate a lot of their priorities in the public square early on. You know, the kind of what was it? The shutdown prevention plan that was anticipating a shutdown in March, I think, of this year, as opposed to working with us early on. Simple things like closing the books, which many of you know, just means like doing tweaks and making sure that our state's finances is in good shape, cleaning up some of the boilerplate language that prevented dollars from going through the healthcare systems and different nonprofits. We couldn't get that done until 10 months after we started those conversations. It's not a way to govern. It's not a way to function. And the biggest disappointment for me, I think, this year is that instead of us getting to a table, sitting down, working through differences in a timely fashion, instead, much of the budget process was played out during press conferences, during press releases and tweets. That is not how myself, our Senate Majority Leader, Winnie Brinks, has traditionally done things. We do what we've always done. We sit down, we talk through our priorities, we work with the House, we work with the administration and come to an agreement. Because of the bifurcated timeline, we were left with only a few weeks to negotiate and compromise. We got it done, but it was not the structured, transparent process that I think that our citizens and stakeholders have come to expect and deserve. So that has been pretty frustrating. We are already from our office trying to look at creative solutions to ensure that that July 1 deadline, that is a statutory deadline, that is not just, not taken seriously, but that we're actually using that to provide more predictability to school districts, local governments, and really anyone who cares about the financial standing of our state, so that we don't end up like our congressional delegation and looking at the longest shutdown in this nation's history.
So kind of building off of that, what lessons would you say, this very atypical budget year, what lessons did you learn that you think can improve coordination next year?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I joke sometimes and say that I was not the best at group work growing up because I like to get my work in early. I like to be very prepared. I was kind of a nerdy kid. And there was always folks who just maybe didn't take the assignment really seriously. But ultimately, when you have a group, when you have a team, you have to bring people along with you because the success and failure of the assignment rest upon all of us. And I think that we will just continue to do what we've always done and try to find consensus earlier. We on our team are already starting to think through priorities, cadence, timeline, areas that perhaps our colleagues in the House or the administration has pointed to as big priorities that maybe everyone didn't get what they wanted this time around. Maybe we can start to even look to embed some of those pieces even now. So I think us starting earlier and trying to find areas of alignment might be a lesson if we have serious actors on all sides that are serious about getting this done early. And from a political perspective, I think that folks will be motivated to get done earlier, given that it's an election year next year.
Sure. Well, maybe on a more positive note, what were you most proud of in this FY26 budget, would you say?
Yeah, this budget, we were able to maintain some critical services, and safeguard our citizens from pretty drastic cuts at the federal level. We knew after the big beautiful bill was signed that that would make a significant blow to many of our state services, particularly in the healthcare industry. So we were able to do things like protect Medicaid and some of the social safety net that was honestly vulnerable given the federal action. On a smaller level, we were able to protect our state employees. I represent Mid-Michigan, which is the home to the lion's share of state workers. We're seeing the attacks on government workers at the federal level. We were able to ensure that there were no layoffs, and that we were protecting core government services and functions, including for our Attorney General and the Secretary of State's offices, so that they would continue to be able to function instead of some of the more political cuts that were proposed out of the House. On a personal note, a big priority for me was protecting and expanding community violence intervention funding. These are men and women who work alongside law enforcement to help prevent crime. We had a lot of talk about public safety, and I look at public safety from a holistic perspective. So maintaining and actually increasing funding for community violence intervention and looking out for our firefighters and our prosecutors. When I think about what makes a community safe, it's a lot of everything. And so that was a big priority of mine and of the Senate, and we were able to have those significant gains. And then overall, the school aid budget was just a big win. Maintaining, meals for kids, increase per pupil and foundation allowance, mental health and safety grants. There's so much good in that school aid budget that we were able to lead that conversation. And for the most part, the Senate's recommendations were all but, what you saw passed in the final school aid bill. And so we're really proud of that. So lots of wins,
Absolutely.
lots of wins.
Yeah, I think the, consensus was that, while, obviously some sacrifices had to be made, there were some really good things that came out of the FY26 budget, despite the kind of drawn out process and some of those concerns.
And I'll also say, one thing that I sometimes forget about, but I've heard a lot of feedback on is, there was a lot of hateful rhetoric, anti-DEI, again, state workers, some of the more divisive rhetoric in our higher ed budgets and traditional K-12 budgets and throughout the different departmental budgets. We eliminated all of that. We just felt as though we wanted to make sure that our state continues to be a welcoming and open state. So regardless of your skin color, who you love, how you identify, we rooted out a lot of those things. It's good red meat for the extreme right, but ultimately none of that got through. And I think that we've gotten a lot of feedback that was really important for us to fight for.
Sure. Well, a lot to be proud of there. In terms of where the budget fell short, what would you say are, a couple of the things that jump out at you?
Yeah. One missed opportunity, and this has just weighed heavy on me. And I think I see some of the lobbyists that are on and association presidents that are on can probably attest to this. This felt like one of the least transparent processes in recent times. The House, for instance, oftentimes talked about transparency, but then did not hold committee hearings for their budgets. It was just kind of quickly getting them through. I believe that transparency shouldn't just mean uprooting earmarks and one-time grant opportunities for nonprofits. It also is the how things get done. It's the sausage making. More of this needs to be in the light of day. You all know that I have one of the bills to address earmark reform. But if we're not serious about having committee hearings that dissect and give members on both sides of the aisle an opportunity to drill down on the why, the what we're doing, I think that's a missed opportunity. I've heard that from lots of folks around Lansing, that they just never felt like they got an opportunity to make the case for their clients or stakeholders or groups, because things would, be super quiet, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's a press conference, something's happening, and then they're voting it out of the chamber. That's no way to govern. And it doesn't provide the public or many of your clients an opportunity to have agency in the process. So I think my hope is that both chambers, everyone really takes transparency to the next level and provides an opportunity for folks to really lift up their voices in the process.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about kind of an erosion of trust, right? And we're seeing some of that. And if there's not transparency or people having the opportunity to testify or get their voices heard, then we'll see that erosion continue. And appreciate your comments there. I'm going to pivot to some of the revenue raising measures that were passed. Obviously we had almost $2 billion in road funding that was part of the agreement, but that necessitated a new tax on marijuana, wholesale tax on marijuana. And now it looks like that's being challenged in the courts. Are you considering any other revenue streams to replace that, or what are the discussions kind of looking like around that and the uncertainty surrounding that wholesale tax?
Well, I think a lot of folks are waiting to see what the result of the legal process is going to be there. Admittedly, the marijuana tax was not my first choice. There were a suite of other revenue options that I believed would raise just as much, if not more, to meet our infrastructure needs, but would not have such a devastating impact on one industry. And so ultimately, I think that we're going to need to have multiple revenue streams and the political courage to actually have enough members to vote yes. Listen, tax increases are never fun. But I think that we can get creative to try to find ways to raise enough revenue in order to meet these needs. Our infrastructure is aging. We've been facing a cliff. So we needed to do something. But I do think the disproportionate impact on the marijuana industry has been a missed opportunity. So that, I think, probably in the next year will be one of the next big fights, is what revenue options are going to be sustainable to meet the moment. Because the infrastructure challenges aren't going to go anywhere. But we will need the money to do just that.
Sure. So, kind of piggybacking off of that, obviously we saw federal changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that, is really putting pressure on state budgets this year and years out from now. How do you see that kind of impacting those conversations? Like you said, you might have to revisit roads, and there's just a lot of pressures looming. How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, when last week the Senate passed a $71 million emergency supplemental to address SNAP cliff, right? It was immediately rejected by the House, but there's always conversations that are ongoing. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because it feels like every couple weeks or months there's a new crisis because of chaos at the federal level. Our state's coffers, our balance sheet cannot do it all, right? Over $200 million a week goes out because of some of the SNAP and food insecurity. We can't do it all. And so I reminded my team that this is only the 10th month. We're now the 11th month of this administration. We cannot predict what's coming next, what wild tax proposal, what gaps in federal funding may happen in the next quarter or in the next 2 years. All we can do is what we can do, which is be good stewards of state taxpayer dollars. And when we can step in, we do. but we don't want to lock in too many of our resources so that our hands are tied and we aren't able to meet the next moment, because we can kind of predict there's more coming. There's more coming, and it's just creating larger and larger holes in the state's resources. So we'll do the best we can with what we have, but there's no predicting what the next 3 years of the Trump administration will will leave us with.
Sure. So you mentioned SNAP, and obviously that's just an emerging crisis. And we saw the action taken by the Senate last week. Some action by the governor and the House. And I'm curious, how you think that will play out over the next week or so. And before the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm grateful that the governor directed $4.5 million dollars for food banks, direct resources for food banks, all 83 counties. That 4.5 can go out right away. And that will roughly mean all 83 counties will be able to be provided assistance for about 2 weeks. So just to give you a scale of what that means. Uh, I listened to NPR this morning. It doesn't feel like these folks are motivated to actually start being productive, negotiating in good faith, making sure that our state or our country actually starts to function again. So we will continue to just work at the leadership level to try to meet the moment. But I'm not encouraged about where our congressional delegation is. Everyone's digging in their heels, and who's impacted are everyday Michiganders, and folks are starved for real leadership, and I don't think they're finding it at the federal level. So we'll do what we can at the state level.
So kind of building off that, do you think that the dysfunction at the federal level and the lack of getting a budget done and the government shutdown, how do you see that impacting conversations at the state level? Because the state has always been able to sort of set themselves apart and really have a functional budgeting process. We came up against the fiscal year deadline, went a little bit over, but not too much. How do you see this long drawn out federal shutdown impacting the state perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you saw it. There was like a copy and paste. If something was presented or proposed at the federal level, we'd see it within a week or two here. There was proposals about a Michigan Doge, right? Cleaning up, ghost employees, and ultimately it doesn't always work. We are in the business of trying to solve problems, trying to well, one, we actually have a deadline. We can't continue to kind of like punt. And so our goal is to try to ignore DC as much as possible. But ultimately, so many of our programs, so many of the things that our citizens expect and deserve are tied to the federal level. And so the longer this plays out, it does impact our economy. It impacts our ability to serve our people. And so we continue to keep an eye on it, but we also have to put our head down and manage our own finances. So it's a balancing act.
And you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but you do expect that perhaps next budget cycle will be more on time, given the motivations to get back and hit the campaign trail.
I'm knocking on all the wood. I'm knocking
on wood that there wasn't a repeat of this year, but do you think that's sort of a prevailing sentiment on both sides of the aisle and both chambers?
I hope so. I mean, I know that it was important for our colleagues in the House to go line by line and to, look at each department and where there was waste. And I hope that they got that exercise out of their system so that we can have a more traditional budget process and a budget timeline that, again, provides predictability for schools, local governments, university partners, because it doesn't have to go down to the wire. The drama is not appreciated probably by any of the folks who are listening here. And ultimately, folks need predictability and stability.
Absolutely. I know that everyone on here appreciates that. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Senator,
Kirsch, I need a question. Just kidding.
I know that you are on a bit of a time crunch here at noon. What would be some final, comments just to close out? Anything that you want to share?
Well, I'm looking at the folks who are on now, and one, I just wanted to thank you all. Most of you have reached out to our office, my team, Christy James, Andy Solon, myself directly. We just appreciate you all continuing to educate us on the emerging issues, not only budget issues, but also policy, because we play a double role here in our office. So thank you for just continuing to be a part of this process. You all work really closely with our team, and it makes for good public policy. The other thing is like, and this might be, I don't think this is controversial, but we don't want to normalize chaos. I've been telling everyone that missing deadlines is not okay. Not communicating with you all until the 11th hour is not okay. We need to push back against whether it's the state level, federal level, even locally. We have to make sure that we are not normalizing instability. It's not good for you. It's not good for our state. And to the extent that we can have more people as a concert of voices saying, nope, we're going to actually do things in a professional, cohesive way, the better. So if you ever have any feedback about ways that I or my team can be a better partner in that way, you know where to find us. We're on the 3rd floor of the Capitol. Just pop in. So, or reach out to any of the lobbyists on the Kelly Cawthorn team. They're wonderful. They partner with us. So yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator. We appreciate so much working with you and your wonderful team. And we really look forward to continuing to work with you alongside our clients and appreciate everything you do for our state.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Bring me
Okay.
back on.
Absolutely.
Oh, all
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks.